The sweat on the back of my neck had nothing to do with the temperature. This ballroom, suspended 50 stories above the Chicago River, was chilled to a precise 68 degrees. It was a cathedral of cold steel and colder glass. And tonight it was filled with people who owned the city, or at least the parts of it that mattered. My name is Marina Vale, and I was the ghost holding the silver tray. I was hiding behind a curtain of steel beads separating the main hall from the service corridor, trying to practice the breathing exercises my neighbor, Nonna Zeta, had taught me. Inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. It was supposed to calm the heart. Right now, my heart was trying to hammer its way out of my polyester uniform. Vale, a word. I jumped, sloshing a bit of champagne onto my tray. Mr. Schmidt, the hotel's night manager, materialized from the shadow of a colossal ice sculpture. His voice was always a low gravel, like he gargled with rocks. "Look at them, Marina." He didn't gesture, just flicked his eyes over the glittering crowd. "This isn't the usual charity crowd. This isn't new money. This is sediment old deep." I knew what he meant. This gala was a fundraiser in name only. The logos projected in tasteful blue light on the walls told the real story. Artemis Lines, Ventura Logistics, names I'd seen on the sides of massive, windowless warehouses down by the Calumet River, names that meant you didn't ask questions. "These people are from the semi-underground," Schmidt hissed, adjusting his cuffs. "You are wallpaper. You serve. You clear. You evaporate. You do not make eye contact. You do not speak unless spoken to. And if you drop a glass—" He paused, letting the silence hang heavy. "Don't." I nodded, my throat too tight to form words. My rent was due in 3 days. I just needed to survive the next 4 hours. My father was Maltese, my mother American. We had no ties to this world, no connections to the Italian lines that ran this city like a private subway. I was just a girl trying to pay for night classes. I slipped back into the orbit of the crowd, a tiny planetoid moving through a galaxy of gravitational monsters. Women with diamonds bright enough to blind you drifted past, their laughter like chipping ice. Men in suits that cost more than my entire year's salary, and I'd done the math, spoke in quiet rumbles, their hands gesturing minimally. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the metallic tang of unsaid threats. A string quartet sawed away in the corner, but their music was just a thin veil over the tension. Then the room shifted. It wasn't a sound, it was a change in pressure, like the air being sucked out of the room before a lightning strike. The ambient hum of conversation didn't just quiet down, it was sliced off. The main elevators opened, and the sea of designer gowns and tuxedos parted. 2 men walked through the gap. The one in front commanded the eye. He was older, perhaps in his late 70s, but he moved with a straight-backed authority that defied his age. He leaned on a cane, not for support, but as a statement. It was dark wood topped with a heavy, intricately carved silver head. Beside him, a half step back, was the real gravity. He was younger, maybe in his mid-30s, and wore a suit so perfectly tailored it looked like a second skin. He was shadow and silence. While the old man's eyes scanned the room with a sort of weary amusement, the younger man's eyes missed nothing. They were dark, flat and hard as obsidian, and they seemed to absorb all the light in the room. Luca Lucenti. Even I, the wallpaper, knew that name. And the old man, the one with the silver cane that had to be his father, the legend, Don Alfio Lucenti. They stopped near the entrance, bypassing the greeting line. A junior concierge, brave or foolish, hurried over with a practiced smile. Don Alfio looked at him, then raised his voice just slightly. He asked a question. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't Italian, not the clean, melodic language you hear on TV. This was something else. It was rougher, older, full of hard consonants and dropped vowels. It sounded like stones rolling down a dry hillside, like the crackle of olive wood on a fire. The concierge's smile froze. He stammered. My apologies, Sir Il Bagno, the restroom. Don Alfio's expression didn't change, but a flicker of irritation crossed his features. He repeated the question, slower this time, the ancient, guttural dialect of the Sicilian highlands echoing strangely in the steel and glass room. The staff around him looked panicked, glancing at each other, their hospitality training utterly failing them. Schmidt, standing near me, began to sweat. He saw the Don's gaze sweeping the room, looking for anyone who understood. His eyes landed on our section. He pointed his cane not at me, but vaguely in my direction. "You," Schmidt hissed, giving me a shove forward. "Go, offer him a drink, smile, apologize." I stumbled, my tray rattling. I was suddenly in the open, maybe 10 feet from the most powerful man in the city. Don Alfio Lucenti looked directly at me. He was waiting. He asked the question a third time, clearly, patiently. He was asking for the terrace, for the fresh air away from all this noise. I shouldn't have known that. I had 0 Italian blood. But I'd spent hundreds of hours in Nonna Cetta's apartment, listening to her talk about the village she'd left 60 years ago, a place so small it was just a dot on a map. I'd learned the rhythms, the cadence, the music of her speech as I helped her roll pasta dough. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. It wasn't my voice, it was hers. The accent was perfect, the tone rustic, the rhythm exact. I told him, in that same ancient dialect, that the terrace was to his left, past the bar, but that the wind off the river was sharp tonight and he might prefer the solarium. The room didn't just go quiet, it died. The string quartet hit a sour note and stopped, the violinist's bow hovering in midair, the clink of ice against glass, the murmur of stock tips and veiled threats, all of it vanished. 100 pairs of eyes, calculating and sharp as broken glass, snapped to me. I was no longer wallpaper. I was a target. Luca Lucenti, who had been surveying the room like a hawk, turned his head, slowly. His eyes, black as polished quartz, locked onto mine. There was no surprise in them. No anger, just a sudden, terrifyingly deep focus. It was the look of a master chess player who just saw a pawn make a move no pawn should know how to make. He knew, in that instant, that I hadn't just spoken his language. I had spoken his father's language. I had opened a door that had been locked for a very, very long time. My entire body went numb. I felt the tray slipping from my sweat-slicked fingers. Then, Don Alfio did something that shattered the tension. He laughed. It was a hoarse, rattling sound, like dry leaves scraping pavement. He beamed at me, a genuine, 1,000-watt smile that lit up his weathered face. "Figlia mia," he said, his voice warm. He switched to heavily accented English. "The pure island tongue. Where did a little bird like you learn such things?" He tapped his cane twice on the marble and gestured for me to come closer. I was frozen. I couldn't move. Schmidt, his face pale as lard, suddenly lunged forward and gripped my elbow. "Miss Vale, your station." "I apologize. Don Lucenti, she is—" He never finished. Luca Lucenti moved so fast I barely saw him. He didn't shove Schmidt, he simply displaced him. One moment Schmidt was holding my arm, the next he was 2 feet away, staggering to regain his balance, blocked by Luca's implacable shoulder. Luca turned to me. He said nothing, but his presence was a physical weight. He reached out and, with impossible gentleness, lifted the silver tray from my trembling hands. His fingers brushed mine. They were ice cold. He set the tray on a passing cart and looked down at me. His voice was a low murmur, meant only for me, but it carried the finality of a closing vault. "From now on, you're a guest." The ripple went through the room. I heard a collective, scandalized intake of breath from a group of women draped in diamonds. Their glares were acidic. Across the room, I saw several men in the crowd, men who wore their suits a little less comfortably. Men with the unmistakable bulk of soldiers exchanged subtle, quick nods. Tattoos snaked from under the cuffs of a man from the Marzano crew. A rival outfit. They were watching. Everyone was watching. My legs felt like water. I wanted to run, to apologize, to evaporate just as Schmidt had ordered. But then I looked past Luca, at the old Don. He was still smiling at me, and in his eyes, beneath the power and the history, there was a warmth that felt like home. It felt like Nonna Chetta's kitchen. It wasn't kindness. Not really. It was recognition. And it stopped me from running. I took a shaky breath and squared my shoulders. Don Alfio offered me his arm, the one without the cane. "A greeting can save a life, child," he said, his voice soft now. I slipped my hand into the crook of his elbow. He patted it, and then he began to walk, leading me straight into the heart of the crowd. The press, a small bank of photographers near the entrance, had been flashing away, but as we moved, a single entity parting the sea of power. They lowered their cameras, as if a single hand had thrown a switch. Every flash went dark. They watched us in absolute silence. All I could hear was the click of my own cheap shoes on the marble floor and the steady, rhythmic tap-tap-tap of Don Alfio Lucenti's silver cane. The walk to the VIP table was the longest 20 yards of my life. I was still clutching Don Alfio's arm, my cheap polyester sleeve brushing against the sleeve of a suit that probably cost $20,000. Every person we passed women who looked like runway models. Men with faces like retired boxers stopped their conversations cold to watch us. The VIP table wasn't just a table, it was an island. It was set on a slightly raised platform, draped in the same pristine white linen as the others. But the air around it was 10 degrees colder. Luca was already there, standing behind a chair, his face an impassive mask. He had moved like a shadow, arriving before us. Don Alfio gestured, and I sank into the chair Luca held. A waitress in my own uniform, a girl named Sarah I'd shared a locker with, stared at me with wide, terrified eyes as she hurried past. Don Alfio, Mr. Lucenti. A voice like dry paper greeted them. A man in an expensive but deliberately unremarkable suit nodded to them. He hadn't been introduced, but he carried the air of someone who didn't need to be. He was flanked by two others, their faces scrubbed clean of all personality. "This is the Midwest Harbor Integrity Council," Luca said, his voice low and flat as he took the seat to my right. "They make sure the lake stays clean." I knew what that meant. The MHIC wasn't police. The police had rules and budgets. The MHIC had influence. They were the gatekeepers for Artemis Lines and Ventura Logistics, and judging by the man's empty eyes, clean was a very flexible term. The table was a study in controlled tension. Don Alfio sat at the head, Luca at his right, and me, the impossible variable, at his left, Giada Lynx. The woman I'd later learn was the opportunistic shark from Ventura, sat opposite, watching. A woman next to the MHIC man, dripping in emeralds, gave me a thin smile. "What an unusual skill. Miss Vale, do you cook? Dear, is that how you learned?" Her tone was dismissive, an attempt to put me back in the box of domestic help. My hands were shaking under the table. I was just a waitress, but the question she asked about cooking, Nonna Chetta's voice echoed in my head. Yes, I stammered. "Nonna Chetta, the woman who taught me. She says you can't trust the language if you don't trust the food." I took a nervous sip of water. She always said that the way most people make caponata here is all wrong. Too sweet. She said you have to use the bitter chocolate, just a shaving, and the old vinegar. It's supposed to argue with itself. That's the point. I clamped my mouth shut, horrified. I was rambling. The Emerald Woman's smile faltered. Don Alfio, however, looked delighted. "She speaks of the agrodolce," he said to the table, as if I'd just solved a complex equation. The bitter-sweet, she understands. The table talk resumed, a clipped, coded language of its own. They spoke of shipping integrity, container percentages, and scheduling. It was a game of Go. Each statement a carefully placed stone. I was hopelessly lost. Then Luca leaned forward. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the MHIC man, but his words were in that deep, rocky dialect. He said, "The man who builds his house on the beach." It wasn't a question. It was a test, a lure. I knew the answer. Nonna Zeta said it every time I complained about my temp jobs or a boyfriend who'd ghosted me. I kept my eyes on my water glass, softly, in that same dialect. I finished the proverb, shouldn't be surprised when the tide takes his furniture. The silence that fell was absolute. It was the sound of a pin dropping on velvet, a mile away. It was a statement about loyalty, about building on solid rock. And I had just finished his sentence. Crack! Don Alfio slapped his open palm flat on the table. The sound made the MHIC man jump. The old Don beamed at me, his eyes crinkling. She knows the foundation, he boomed. In that same instant, Luca's phone, lying face down on the linen, gave a single, silent vibration. He didn't move for a second. Then, slowly, he turned it over. I was sitting opposite and slightly to his side. I couldn't see the screen, but I saw him. His eyes didn't widen, they didn't narrow, they just hardened. All the light went out of them. He reached for his glass of water, and I saw his hand. His fingers tightened on the glass, just slightly, but with enough pressure that his knuckles turned white. It wasn't a tremor. It was the conscious suppression of immense force. The message was bad. A new voice, smooth as brushed steel, cut through the quiet. Miss Vale. That was truly fascinating. I looked up. It was Giada Lynx, the woman from Ventura. She was watching me with an unnerving, predatory curiosity. As if I were a new species, she was deciding whether to hunt or to tag. "My name is Giada Lynx," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "We at Ventura Logistics are always searching for cultural liaisons, people who understand the nuances of the old ways. I imagine the position would offer a salary substantially higher than your current one." She was offering me a job, right here. She was trying to poach me from the Lucentis before I even knew what I was. I was completely out of my depth. "Oh, I thank you, but I'm just a waitress." "The girl is occupied," Don Alfio said, his voice mild, but the statement was a closing door. He turned to me, the warmth returning to his eyes, shutting out the rest of the table. "But she is right about one thing. Figia, this is more than cooking. Who not just a neighbor? Who kept this alive for you?" I told him the simple, unadorned truth. Nonna Zeta. She lives in Little Village, in the apartment on the 3rd floor, right above mine. Her family is gone. She gets lonely. I help her with groceries, bring her mail up. She pays me in stories and pasta. She's 84. She's been in that apartment for 60 years. The specificity of it, 3rd floor. Little Village seemed to land on Luca. His posture changed. He wasn't just observing a curiosity anymore. He was cataloging data. This was real. I felt the weight of all their eyes on me. It was too much. I glanced away, looking past Luca's shoulder to the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights were a carpet of diamonds blurring against the dark glass. And in the reflection, I saw it. It wasn't a reflection of our table. It was a reflection of the service corridor entrance, 20 feet away, in the darkened glass. Clear as day. I saw 2 men. One was a man I recognized from the lobby, one of the Marzano crew, the one with the distinctive tattoos climbing his neck. He was handing a sleek aluminum briefcase to another man, a man in a conservative suit, a man who had been standing behind the MHIC representative just 10 minutes ago. My breath caught in my throat. It was over in a second. The men melted back into the shadows. I tore my eyes from the window and looked, instinctively, at Luca. He hadn't been looking at the window. He had been looking at me. But he saw it. He saw the flicker of recognition in my expression, the sudden terror. He tracked my gaze to the window, registered the empty space where the men had been, and his eyes snapped back to mine. No words were exchanged. Not a single muscle in his face moved, but we both knew. I had seen the payoff, and he knew I'd seen it. A silent, cold confirmation passed between us. Yes, I see it too. Now look away. My heart was a hummingbird in my ribs. "Nonna Zeta," Don Alfio said, blissfully, or perhaps deliberately, unaware of the silent exchange. He was smiling again. From the high country, I'd wager, Does she sing the old songs? He hummed a few bars of a haunting, simple melody. At the weddings, he murmured. They used to sing this when the bride crossed the threshold, a prayer to the sea. He sang the first line, his voice a gravelly but true baritone. It was a well-known verse. But my blood ran cold. I knew that song. Nonna Seta sang it all the time, but she sang it differently. She sang it with a lilt, a change in the third note, and she always followed it with another line. I don't know why I did it. Maybe the tension, maybe the fear, maybe just the pull of a melody that felt more like home than my own apartment. I sang the next line. Ma u mari si ricorda I suoi lacrimi. But the sea remembers her tears. And I sang it with Nonna Seta's lilt, the variant. If the room had frozen when I spoke, it turned to solid ice now. Don Alfio's smile vanished. He stopped breathing. He stared at me, his dark eyes wide, not with pleasure, but with a profound, earth-shattering shock. The MHIC men in Giada Links just looked confused, shut out of a conversation they couldn't hear. But Luca moved. His stillness became electric. He leaned forward, his entire body tensed, his eyes boring into me. He didn't just hear the line, he heard the notes. He heard the cadence. I hadn't just sung a folk song. I had sung the code, the specific regional variation that, as I would learn, was used as a password, a key to things long since buried. I had just proven I wasn't just a speaker. I was a vault. Before a single person at the table could speak, a deafening noise shattered the glass cathedral. Whoop, whoop, whoop. The fire alarm. Red strobe lights ignited, bathing the ballroom in silent, rhythmic bursts of crimson. Panic erupted. The glitterati shrieked. Chairs scraped violently against the marble. People were running, a stampede of silk and diamonds pushing toward the main elevators. A waiter burst through the service doors, his face white, coughing. "Fire!" he screamed. "In the kitchen, there's smoke!" But it wasn't a fire. I could smell it, even from here. It wasn't wood smoke. It was chemical. Acrid. It was a probe. Marzano. They were testing the exits, testing the response, creating chaos. And in chaos, things and people get lost. I looked around, panicked, for Don Alfio, but he was already being hustled by two of his own men. A hand clamped around my upper arm. It wasn't rough, but it was steel. It was Luca. "Not that way," he growled, his voice a low command that cut right through the alarm. He wasn't pulling me toward the main elevators with the screaming crowd. He was pulling me away from the table, back toward the service corridor I had been hiding in just an hour a lifetime ago. He shoved open the heavy steel door, and we were plunged into the humming, fluorescent-lit, concrete hallway. The alarm was suddenly muffled, distant. He pushed me flat against the wall, his body shielding me from the open door. His arm braced next to my head. His dark eyes, the color of obsidian, were blazing. The stone wasn't dead. It was volcanic. He was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him. "Come with me," he commanded. It wasn't a request. "From this second, Ba," he said, his voice a low, lethal promise that vibrated through the concrete wall. "Anyone who even looks at you pays the price." We didn't take the stairs. The service corridor was a maze of concrete and humming pipes, the whoop, whoop, whoop of the alarm already fading behind us, replaced by the heavy thud of Luca's footsteps. He still had my arm, a grip of warm steel, pulling me toward a freight elevator I didn't even know existed. The doors hissed shut, sealing us in a metal box that smelled of machine oil and old paper. We descended, not to the glittering lobby, but to a dark, cavernous sub-basement, a black sedan, the kind that absorbs light, idled by the ramp. The driver didn't look back as Luca opened the rear door and guided me inside. The ride was silent. We moved fast, away from the river and the skyscrapers, plunging into the industrial veins of the city, all iron bridges and brick warehouses sleeping under the sodium-orange glow of the streetlights. My heart, which had been trying to escape my chest, was now just a dull, heavy thump, thump, thump. I was still wearing my stupid polyester uniform, a smear of champagne drying on the sleeve. We pulled into a dark alley behind what looked like a defunct printing press. The faded paint on the brick announced G&R Press. Luca led me to a featureless steel door. Don Alfio was already there, as if he'd been teleported. He was flanked by two men I hadn't seen before, both built like refrigerators. He was perfectly calm, his silver-headed cane resting lightly on the pavement. The door had no handle, no keypad, just a small, dark speaker grill. Don Alfio leaned in, and he didn't say a password. He simply spoke, his voice that same ancient, gravelly Sicilian. He spoke the first line of the proverb Luca had tested me with. "The man who builds his house on the beach." His voice was the key. There was a heavy thud of a magnetic lock releasing, a hiss of hydraulics, and the massive door slid open. The inside wasn't a factory. It was a metal jewel box, clean, sterile, with brushed steel walls, recessed lighting, and silent, glass partitions dividing the massive open space. It smelled like clean air and expensive electronics. On a frosted glass wall near the entrance, a single name was etched glass ridge. I was rubbing my arms, the adrenaline starting to curdle into a bone-deep chill. My polyester felt ridiculous in this high-tech bunker. Luca watched me. He didn't offer a blanket or a kind word. He walked to a gleaming, complicated espresso machine built into one wall and began to work. The hiss of the steam wand, the sharp thump as he packed the grounds, they were the first normal sounds I'd heard in what felt like a year. He held out a tiny, heavy porcelain cup. My hand was trembling so hard I almost spilled the dark liquid. I saw his eyes flick to my hand, then back to my face. I forced myself to steady my grip, to take the cup without rattling it against the saucer. I met his gaze. His eyes, that dark, polished quartz, didn't soften, but they registered it. The forced calm, the fact that I wasn't weeping or screaming. He noticed I wasn't falling apart. "This is my team," Luca said, his voice low. He gestured to a woman standing by a bank of servers. She was lean, with short, practical dark hair, and wore cargo pants and a simple black sweater. She looked like she could run a marathon and then break your neck, all before breakfast. She didn't smile. She just nodded once. Ari Sardo. She handles security. And Dr. Penumbra. A man who looked like he'd just wandered out of a university library blinked at us from behind a screen covered in algorithms. He wore a rumpled tweed jacket over a hoodie. Dr. Umbra finds patterns. The names felt like smoke. Sarto, Umbra, Shadow. They were aliases, every one of them. Don Alfio sat in a sleek, modern leather chair, his cane resting against the arm. He looked at me, his gaze kind but penetrating. "Now, Figlia," he said gently. "Tell us, how do you know the music?" So I told them. I told them everything. Not just about Nonna Chetta, but about my life, the real one. "I'm nobody," I insisted, the hot, bitter espresso warming my cold hands. "I work 3 jobs. This hotel gig, a morning shift at a diner in Greektown, and I stock shelves at a pharmacy 3 nights a week. I dropped out of night school. My credits are a mess. I'm just me." "Why?" Luca asked. The question was quiet, but it demanded an answer. "Nonna Chetta," I whispered, the name catching in my throat. She's all I have. My parents are gone. She has a heart condition, a bad one. The money I make, it's not for school. Not really. It goes to her medication, her rent, to keeping her comfortable." Don Alfio nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he already knew. "Your voice. Marina, it doesn't just speak a language. It unlocks a tradition, one that men like Marzano and many others believe was buried with my father." He nodded to Ari. She touched a screen. From speakers hidden in the ceiling, a melody began to play. It was an ancient turntable, digitized, the faint crackle of a vinyl record filling the room. It was the wedding song, the one Don Alfio had sung at the table, but it was the plain version. "Listen," Don Alfio commanded. I listened. It was pretty. "But that's not right," I said before I could stop myself. "Dr. Umbra," the professor spun in his chair. What's not right?" The third note, I said, frowning. In the second bar, it's flat. Nona Zeta always sings it sharp. She said the city singers got it wrong. They didn't understand the lilt. I paused, then added, and she always follows it with the lacrime di mare, the tears of the sea. The part I sang. She said the song isn't complete without it. Doctor. Umbra's fingers flew across his keyboard. He pulled up a sound file, isolating the melody. He digitally adjusted the third note, sharpening it. A new algorithm bloomed on his screen. My God, he whispered, pushing his glasses up. It's a key, a tonal shift. It's not just a variation, it's a cipher. The old ways, Don Alfio said, his voice resonating with history. They didn't trust paper, they didn't trust banks. They hid their routes in music, in lullabies and feast day songs. Doctor, Umbra turned to us, his eyes wide with academic fervor. He's right, the tears of the sea isn't just a lament. The cadence, the melodic intervals, they match old maritime coordinates, hidden ports, secret routes along the Great Lakes, used by the first immigrants to bring their families over. He looked at Luca. These aren't just harbors. Luca, they're off the books, completely invisible. Our shipping routes, Luca stated, the pieces clicking into place. Artemis lines, we've been trying to legitimize those old routes for 5 years, but the original ledgers, the paper maps we thought they were lost in the fire in 1972. Marzano doesn't want to legitimize them, Ari Sarto said, her first words. Her voice was low and steady. He wants to use them, to move his product. If he finds those routes, he bypasses the MHIC and everyone else. He takes the whole lake. They all looked at me. I was the key. Nona Zeta's lullabies were a map. Luca stood up. He walked to a large, armored window, looking out at the dark brick of the alley. Marzano knows you spoke the dialect. He doesn't know you know the music yet. That's why he just sent a probe, not a team. But he will. He tested the hotel to get to you. He'll go for the source next. My blood turned to ice. Nona Zeta. We can protect her, Luca said, turning to face me. We can protect you, but I need you. I need the key. He made the offer. It hung in the sterile air between us. Work for me. As a consultant, you will analyze the dialect, the music. You will work with Dr. Umbra. You will be paid handsomely, enough to cover Nona Zeta's medical needs for the rest of her life. And you will have my full 24-hour protection. My head was spinning. This was a nightmare, a dark, terrifying fantasy. I can't, I stammered, shaking my head. I saw those men, the Marzanos. I saw the payoff in the window. This is a violent world. I don't want blood on my hands. Luca crossed the space between us in 2 silent strides. He stopped just inches away. I had to tilt my head back to look up at him. He was all shadow and coiled intensity. I will keep your hands clean, he said. His voice a raw, quiet promise that felt more binding than any contract. You will work with music and history. The blood, that's my business. Leave it to me. I looked at his hands, the hands that had gripped the water glass, the hands that could crush or, as I'd seen him take the tray from me, be impossibly gentle. I thought of Nonna Zeta, alone in her 3rd-floor apartment, her heart skipping beats. She's all I have, I whispered. She'll be safe by sunrise, he vowed. I took a deep, shuddering breath. Okay, I'll help you, temporarily, but I have conditions. For the first time, a flicker of genuine surprise crossed Luca's face. 1, I said, my voice gaining strength. Nonna Zeta is moved somewhere safe, somewhere kind, not a box like this, and I get to see her. Done, Luca said. 2, I hesitated, but the image of the crowd at the gala flashed in my mind. No civilians, no children. Your fight with Marzano. I don't want any innocent people hurt because of what I'm doing. No one else gets pulled into this. Don Alfio smiled, a slow, appreciative expression. Luca just nodded. My terms are the same. Ari Sarto stepped forward. She held out her hand. In her palm was a small, flat piece of dark red clay, like a shard from an ancient pot. It was strung on a simple leather cord. There were markings on it, faint but clear ancient Sicilian script. "We found this with the few ledgers we do have," she said. "We thought it was just a token, but the markings, they matched the title of the song, Lacrime di Mare." I reached out and took it. The ceramic was cold, but it warmed instantly in my grasp. It felt heavy, like it belonged in my hand. It was the other half of the key. I looked up, clutching the amulet. I was terrified. I was a waitress in a bunker, holding a map to a criminal empire, employed by the city's most dangerous man. Don Alfio rose from his chair and walked over to me. He placed his warm, dry hand over mine, covering the amulet. He smiled, and this time, it was all warmth, the calculation gone. "You welcome me at the right time, Marina," he said, his voice soft. "In the old tongue, in the old way. Now, I welcome you." He leaned in, his silver hair brushing my temple, and his next words were in that beautiful, gravelly dialect, a formal, ancient greeting I'd only heard Nonna Chetta use when she prayed. "Benvenuta in familia," he said. "Welcome to the family, in my way, with protection." The morning after the gala, the Glass Ridge safe house was silent. It was a silence so complete it felt artificial, the sound of air scrubbed clean and recycled. I had slept for maybe 3 hours on a cot in a small, windowless room, and woke up still feeling the phantom grip of Luca's hand on my arm. Ari Sardo had given me a change of clothes, a soft, worn black sweater, and a pair of cargo pants that were slightly too big. My polyester waitress uniform was in an incinerator chute, a symbolic and deeply unsettling gesture. I found Dr. Penumbra already at his station, nursing a mug of tea and staring at a wall of code. Luca was there, too, in a fresh suit, standing by the high-tech espresso machine. He was a man of rituals. "He's running a trace on all known Marzano associates," Umbra muttered to me, nodding toward Luca. "Trying to find the 2 men from the reflection." "You need to eat," Ari said, placing a protein bar and a bottle of water on the desk in front of me. She was my shadow, my guardian, and my jailer, all in one. I couldn't eat. I was clutching the small ceramic amulet. It was cool in my palm, the leather cord rough against my skin. I was a consultant. The word felt like a lie. I was a prisoner with a paycheck. I was trying to help Dr. Umbra cross-referenced the Lacrime di Mare melody with property records when my phone buzzed on the table. My personal phone, the one I'd had in my pocket. Ari had scanned it and given it back, deeming it clean. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it. The protein bar turned to ash in my mouth. It was a picture of Nonna Chetta. She was at the street market in Little Village, the one she loved. She was holding a bright red tomato. Her face crinkled in a smile as she argued with the vendor. It was her, alive, happy. And it had been taken from across the street. With a telephoto lens, the edge of the frame was blurred, the focus tight on her, isolating her. I didn't scream. I didn't drop the phone. I just stopped breathing. All the air left the room. Luca was across the room, speaking in low tones on his own phone, but he saw it. He had a predator's sense for a change in the atmosphere. He saw the color drain from my face. He was beside me in 2 silent strides. He didn't ask. He just gently took the phone from my frozen hand. His face, already hard, turned to granite. "Ari," he said, his voice lethally soft. "On it," Norshi replied, already typing. "Protocol Aegis now." What does that mean?" I whispered, my voice sounding distant. "They know where she is. They're watching her." "Not anymore," Luca said, his eyes on the photo. He was memorizing the angle, the shadows. "Aegis is my shield. We're moving her. Right now." "Moving her where? To a box like this?" The panic was rising, a hot acid in my throat. "St. Aurelia Sanctum," he said, his focus absolute. "It's a private cardiac facility in the suburbs. My family were the primary benefactors. It's the safest hospital in the state of Illinois. She'll be a priority patient, not a prisoner. She'll have the best doctors in the country. She'll be comfortable. I gave you my word." He was already dialing his own phone, rattling off codes and instructions. He was saving her. But with the cold, precise efficiency of a general deploying troops. Just as I was trying to process this, Ari's console beeped. "Boss," she said, her voice tight. "Incoming, it's the MHIC, an official request. They want to informally interview Miss Vale this afternoon." I looked at Luca, the briefcase in the reflection, the man in the suit. "It's a trap." "Corbin Drex," Luca said. His phone conversation finished. "He runs the council's enforcement division, and as you saw, he also runs errands for Marzano." He looked at the clock on the wall. He's getting impatient. "What do we do?" I asked. "Ari, accept the invitation," Luca commanded. "Tell them we will be there at 3 p.m. "Boss, that's a mistake," Ari argued, turning in her chair. "Walking her in there? That's not a shield. That's a target." "It's a target he expects," Luca said. "We need leverage. We have 4 hours." He turned to Doctor, Umbra, and me. "The music, the map, what do we have?" "It's just theory," Umbra said, flustered. "The tonal cipher gives us a region, not a location. We're missing the key to the grid." My hands were shaking again. I was pacing, my fingers tracing the edges of the ceramic amulet around my neck. The script was raised, but between the letters, my fingernail caught on something, a groove, a tiny, perfect, concentric groove, almost invisible. Like a record. "Doctor, Umbra," I said, my voice hoarse. This is going to sound crazy, but this amulet, the marks, they're not just script. They're cut. What if—" His eyes widened. He grabbed the amulet, careful not to touch the surface, and placed it under a digital microscope. "You're right, it's not just a token. It's an audio disc, a micro-etching." In 30 seconds, he had it on the turntable, the stylus arm recalibrated for the ceramic. The sound that came out was a high-pitched, agonizing screech. "Filter it," Luca ordered. Umbra's fingers flew. He applied filters, slowed the speed by 90%, isolated the frequencies. The screech vanished, and a melody emerged. It was Lacrime di Mare, but not the public version, and not Nonna Setta's variant. It was a third, haunting harmony, one that wove between the other two. Umbra's screen lit up, a map of Lake Michigan overlaying his audio software. "It's the map legend," he whispered. Awestruck, the cipher gave us the area. This harmony, it gives us the coordinates. One specific point, right here at. He pointed, middle of the lake, near the old Calumet breakwater. Luca looked at the clock. "That's 20 minutes from here. Ari, get the car." "Luca, no," Ari said, standing up. "It's the most exposed point in the city. A setup?" "It's leverage," Luca countered, his voice flat. "We're not walking into Drex's office blind. We go now." The black sedan cut through the gray. Windy Chicago afternoon. This was not a city of glass and steel. This was the city of rust and iron. We pulled up to the breakwater. It was a long concrete pier, deserted, waves crashing against the pilings. Ari drove to the very end, her eyes scanning the sky, the water. "What are we looking for?" I asked, my voice small in the armored car. "That," Ari said, her voice tight. A black dot was hovering a quarter mile out, directly over the coordinates from the amulet. It was moving toward us, fast. "Drone," Ari said. "High-end, not police." The high-pitched insectile buzz grew louder. "Stay in the car, don't move," so Luca ordered. Ari was already out. She popped the trunk from the dash and retrieved a long, black case. It wasn't a rifle. It was something else. She aimed it at the sky. There was no bang, just a high-frequency shriek that vibrated in my teeth. The drone's lights flickered. It wobbled, its rotors spinning erratically. It tried to correct, then it just died, dropping like a stone into the choppy, gray water. "It's gone," I breathed. "No," Ari said, pointing. "It's snagged on the rebar, 10 feet down." She pulled on a pair of waterproof waders from her gear bag and was over the side before Luca could object. She was back in less than 5 minutes, dripping, holding a mangled piece of black carbon fiber. "Well," she said, dropping it on the concrete, "Marzano isn't hiding his shell companies anymore." There was a logo, partially melted from the focused energy pulse, Nordson Finance. "He knew we'd come here," I whispered, horrified. "He knew we'd find the region." Umbra's voice crackled over the car's comms system. "He'd been monitoring us from Glass Ridge. He just didn't know we had the amulet. He was watching the whole grid." We were back in the car, speeding toward downtown. We had maybe an hour before the meeting. My mind was racing. But what was the point? A coordinate in the middle of open water. It doesn't make sense. "It's a calibration point, Marina," Umbra said. "It tells us how to read the rest of the map. But what is the map?" I was looking at the hydrographic charts on the laptop in my lap. Water depths, shipping lanes, and then I saw it. The song, Lacrime di Mare, Tears of the Sea. "Nonna Chetta," I said, thinking aloud. "When she sings that song, she's always talking about missing the island, missing the ocean. She always says, 'The lake is dead, cara mia, the sea breathes.'" "Breathes," Umbra repeated. "Tides." His fingers flew across the keyboard. The original routes, they weren't deep water. They were tidal tunnels, hidden at low tide, the Chicago River, before they reversed it in 1900. The rhythm of the song, the breath, it's not a map. It's a calendar. It's a schedule for a tidal gate. He cross-referenced the melody's unique, lurching rhythm with the old river flow charts. Got it, a hidden floodgate under the old 18th Street Bridge. It's only accessible when the lake pressure is at a specific low, once every 12 hours. That's our door. Luca didn't hesitate. "Ari, 18th Street, now." We screeched to a halt under a rusty, abandoned overpass. Ari and Luca were gone. I was alone in the car, my heart hammering against my ribs. They were back in 10 minutes. Luca was carrying a heavy, rusted, mud-caked steel box. He threw it in the passenger seat and pried it open with a tool from Ari's bag. Inside, wrapped in thick black oilcloth, was a thick, leather-bound book. The original manifests. Luca breathed, his voice rough with something I'd never heard before. Awe. "The Blue Route. It's all here. Every crate, every name. From 1890. He pulled out his phone. He took rapid, high-definition photographs of every single page. This proves the routes were legitimate trade routes. They were never illegal. They were just forgotten. He typed a name into his encrypted messenger and sent the files. "Celine Coy, my lawyer. She's pragmatic. She can use this. She can have the routes legitimized, public, by tomorrow." He was cutting Marzano off. He was taking the shadows and flooding them with light. We were speeding toward the MHIC tower, my interview. Luca's burner phone rang. It was Aries. "Boss, change of plans," she said. Her voice clipped. She was driving, but she was monitoring something else. "Drex isn't at the MHIC office. He's at the courthouse. He just filed a warrant. Material witness protection. He's not interviewing you. Marina, he's seizing you." Luca's face was stone. "He's not taking her into MHIC custody. He's taking her into his custody. He'll make her disappear. This is Marzano's move. The interview was just to get you out of my protection." He looked at me, his dark eyes holding mine. "I can get you out of the city. Right now. We can be in Wisconsin in an hour. Ari can handle Drex." I thought of Nonna Chetta, safe in St. Aurelia. I thought of the drone. I thought of the ledger. "No, he'll just find another way. He'll win. You said you'd keep my hands clean. Let's go see Mr. Drex. But we do it your way." A flicker of something respect passed through his eyes. He nodded. "Once. My way it is." He didn't drive to the courthouse. He drove straight to the MHIC tower, the Shark's Den. He parked in the reserved spot right by the front door. He walked me into the main lobby, in front of 50 employees and a dozen security cameras. We were shown to a glass-walled interview room on the top floor. Corbin Drex was waiting, and he was furious. He was a slick man, all expensive gel and gold cufflinks, and he was sweating. "This was highly irregular. Lucenti," Drex snapped. She was supposed to be brought to the courthouse. I'm protecting my consultant, Luca said. He and Ari stood outside the open door, visible to the entire office. You can talk to her, but my team stays. Drex stormed into the room and slammed the door, shutting us in. Miss Vale, we have reason to believe you are in grave danger, he started, reading from a script. You are being held by the Lucenti organization against your will. I just looked at him. I looked at his sweaty face, his shifty eyes. I thought of the briefcase in the reflection. I know what I saw. Mr. Drex, I said quietly, at the gala. His face went white. He leaned in, hissing, You don't know anything, you little... You're going to sign this protection order. You're coming with me, now. He was close. Too close. I leaned into the microphone on the table, the one recording our interview, and I spoke. But not in English. I spoke in Noneteta's dialect. It wasn't a greeting. It wasn't a song. It was the malocchio, the ill wish. May your bread be stale and your water be sand, I said, my voice low and steady, filled with all the cold fury I didn't know I possessed. May the fish you catch have empty eyes. May the salt on your table turn to glass. Drex recoiled, his face a mask of confusion and superstitious fear. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. It was ancient, vicious. And in the observation room, through the one-way mirror, a hidden microphone picked up every word. Don Alfio, sitting in the dark, heard it, and he let out a short, barking laugh of pure, unadulterated delight. Drex heard the laugh echo from the speaker on the wall. He panicked. He knew he was being watched. He knew he'd been recorded. Turn that off. Who's in there? This is a secure interview. The doors to the interview room burst open. But it wasn't Drex's men. It was a new team. Clean, hard-eyed. They wore MHIC windbreakers. But with a different insignia, they were led by a woman with icy blue eyes and a no-nonsense bun. Corbin Drex, she snapped, her voice like a siren. You're relieved of duty. Juno, what is this? Drex sputtered. Acting Commissioner Juno Mir, she corrected him. The Port Integrity Commission just received a very interesting anonymous tip regarding your personal finances and your undeclared partnership with Nordson Finance. Drex's jaw dropped. He looked at me, then at Luca, who was leaning against the doorframe, watching. The anonymous tip, I realized, had come from Celine Coy, Luca's lawyer. She had used the Nordson logo from the drone, the coordinates from the amulet, and the ledger from the safe box. It had all happened in the last 30 minutes. Drex had walked into a trap, our trap. Juno Meyer looked at me. Miss Vale, my apologies. Your invitation seems to have been misplaced. You're free to go. I stood up, my legs shaking so badly I almost fell. I walked out of the glass box, past the stunned faces of the office, and stopped in the hallway, right in front of Luca. He was still impassive, a mask of cold control, but his eyes were burning. He'd kept his promise. My hands were clean. His were not. The ride back to Glass Ridge was a silent, vibrating blur. The adrenaline that had turned my spine to steel in that glass-walled interrogation room was gone, and my bones felt like they'd been replaced with cold, wet sand. Ari drove, her eyes constantly scanning the mirrors. Luca sat in the passenger seat, a silent, dark statue, speaking in low, encrypted bursts into his phone. I was huddled in the back, the ghost of Corbin Drex's panicked, sweaty face seared into my memory. The heavy black sedan plunged back into the alley. The hidden hydraulic door hissed open and slammed shut behind us, the thud of the magnetic lock echoing in the concrete space. We were safe. The second that thought registered, my legs gave out. I didn't fall. I just folded. My back hit the cold and brushed steel wall of the safe house, and I slid down until I was sitting on the floor. I couldn't breathe. I put my head on my knees, the borrowed cargo pants rough against my cheek. I wasn't a key. I wasn't a consultant. I was a waitress who had just watched a man's life get systematically dismantled in under 30 minutes. I had put the ancient, vicious words of the Malocchio into a government microphone, and I had meant them. A single, dry sob ripped itself out of my chest. It was a horrible, ugly sound. I heard footsteps, not Ori's, Luca's. He stopped. Not right in front of me, but a few feet away. I could see his expensive, polished shoes. He just stood there. He wasn't touching me. He wasn't patting my back or telling me it was okay. He was just present. He was giving me the dignity of my own breakdown. After a full minute and when my breathing started to hitch and slow, his voice came low and quiet. "You did well, Marina." I looked up, my eyes burning. That man Drex, he was going to make me disappear, and he was going to take me somewhere and... "Yes," Luca said. His voice was flat. There was no apology in it, just a statement of fact. "And you," I whispered, my voice rough, "you ruined him. You crushed him with a phone call and a picture of a drone." "That was the clean way," he said. "He'll face a federal commission. He won't just disappear." He was drawing a line between his methods and Marzano's, a line I hadn't been able to see until now. The pressure of the last 48 hours, the gala, the dialect, the terror for Nona, the chase at the breakwater, the glass box, it all came crashing down. The sobs were silent now, just hot. Heavy tears I couldn't stop. Luca crouched. He was still a yard away. He wasn't looming. He just held out a handkerchief. It wasn't paper. It was soft, white, folded linen. I took it. It was clean and smelled faintly of starch. "Why are you like this?" I finally managed to ask, wiping my face. "Why are you being decent?" He stayed where he was, balanced on his heels. For the first time, I saw that the mask was gone. He just looked tired, a deep, structural weariness that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. "Because you're the first person in maybe 15 years who has spoken the unvarnished truth to my face," he said, his voice quiet, stripped of its command. I sniffed, frowning. "I don't understand." "The name," he said, gesturing vaguely. "Lucenti. It's not a name. It's a wall. People don't talk to me. They talk to the name. They tell me what they think I want to hear. They tell me what they're supposed to. They're afraid of me, or they want something from me. Usually both." He finally sat on the floor, leaning his back against the opposite wall, his legs stretched out. "It's isolating. But you—" "I'm terrified of you, Luca," I admitted, my voice trembling. "You are," he conceded, a faint shadow of a smile touching his lips. "But you still made conditions. You still told a corrupt commissioner to go to hell in a dead language. The fear doesn't manage you. It just is." He stood up, all grace and coiled energy, and walked to his machine, the familiar hiss of steam, the sharp thump of the portafilter, the ritual. He brought the small, heavy cup over to me. "Drink this," he said. My hands were steadier now. I took the cup. The breakdown had cleared my head, scraped the adrenaline away. I took a sip, expecting the bitter comfort. This time I just tasted it, and it was awful. It was burned, all force, no finesse. A small, hysterical giggle bubbled in my chest. I looked at him, standing over me like a hawk. "You wanted the truth, right?" He nodded, wary. "This espresso," I said, taking another tiny sip to confirm. It's a bit bad. It's really bad, actually." He froze. His entire body went rigid. He looked at the cup, then at my face. He was searching for the joke, for the angle. He found none. And then a sound came out of him that I had never heard before. It wasn't a chuckle. It was a short, sharp, genuine laugh. It was rusty, like a hinge that hadn't been used in a decade. It surprised him as much as it surprised me. "My father," he said, the smile lingering, making him look years younger, "says the exact same thing. He says I have no subtlety." "He's not wrong," I murmured into the cup, and suddenly the vast, cold, steel room felt a few degrees warmer. The main door hissed open, and Don Alfio walked in. He must have been listening to the whole exchange from the observation room. He ignored Luca completely and walked straight to me. His eyes were bright, filled with a fierce, burning pride. "You spoke the Malocchio in a glass house," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You, a girl with no island blood, you reminded them of the old salt, the old rules." He reached into his vest pocket, passed the chain of his pocket watch, and pulled something out. It was a string of beads, not glittering diamonds, but simple, dark, polished wood, worn smooth with time. A small, carved silver medal, tarnished with age, hung from it. "These," he said, his voice dropping, "were my wife's, Maria. She brought them from the village. She wore them every day of her life." He held them out. I scrambled to my feet, wiping my hand on my pants. "Don Alfio, no, I can't. This is too much." "It is not a gift," he corrected me, his eyes gentle but firm. He took my hand and pressed the warm beads into my palm. "It is an acknowledgement. You gave me back the sound of my home. You gave my son a reason to laugh. You are one of us now. Picarida, in spirit, where it counts." I closed my hand around the beads. They were warm, as if they held a lifetime of sun. Later that evening, the safe house was quiet. Ari was at her station, a silent sentinel, doctor. Umbra was asleep on a cot in his office. I was starving. The protein bar from that morning felt like a distant memory. I found the kitchen, a sleek, sterile alcove with a terrifyingly complex induction stove, but the refrigerator was stocked. Real food, eggplant, celery, tomatoes, capers, olives. I started to cook. The simple, rhythmic thud of my knife on the cutting board was the most normal thing I'd experienced in 2 days. It was grounding. The smell of simmering tomatoes and vinegar must have drawn him out. Luca appeared in the kitchen doorway, his suit jacket off, his sleeves rolled up. He just watched me, leaning against the doorframe. "That's not how you do it," I said, without looking up. He raised an eyebrow. "I'm just standing here." "You're standing there wrong," I said. "This is Nonna Zeta's caponata. It needs respect, and it needs rhythm." I pointed with my wooden spoon to another cutting board and an unchopped eggplant. "Help or go away." He looked surprised, but he came into the kitchen. He picked up the knife. He was clumsy, all force. No, I sighed. I started to hum, the lilt, the lacrime di mare. "You chop now, and now it's a dance, not a fight." He listened, his brow furrowed in concentration. He started to match my rhythm. Chop, chop, stir, chop. We moved around each other in the small, gleaming kitchen. He reached for the salt. I ducked under his arm for the vinegar. It was a silent, awkward, intimate tango. I glanced over at Ari. She was watching us, her face unreadable, but a tiny, almost invisible smile was playing on her lips. As I passed her to grab a bowl, she muttered, so low only I could hear, "The boss, he only trusts people who dare to correct him." I felt a hot, stupid blush climb my neck. I buried my face in the steam from the pot. We ate at the steel table, straight from the pot. It was perfect. It tasted like home. It tasted like Nonna Zeta. I couldn't sit still. The recycled air was suffocating me. I walked to the heavy steel door that led to the alley. "Where are you going?" Ari's voice was instantly alert. "Just air," I said. "The air in here is too clean. I just want to stand in the alley for 5 minutes. You can watch me." Luca nodded to Ari. He unsealed the door. The night air hit me. It was cold, damp. A fine, miserable Chicago drizzle was falling, but it was real. It smelled like wet pavement and the river. I was just in the thin sweater. I shivered, wrapping my arms around myself. Luca was standing in the doorway, a dark silhouette against the bright, sterile light of the safe house. He said nothing. He just shrugged off his suit jacket, the $1,000, perfectly tailored armor, and walked over. He draped it over my shoulders. It was impossibly warm. It enveloped me, smelling faintly of him, that clean scent of expensive soap, espresso, and something metallic, like ozone. It was a simple, practical gesture, but it was the warmest thing that had happened to me in years. It felt like a shield. I huddled into it and turned to face him in the drizzle. "Luca?" "Marina, we have a plan. The regatta. Celine Coy is making the ledgers public. I know it's big, but before it starts, before the next thing happens," I clutched the lapels of his jacket. "I need to see her." He didn't have to ask who. "St. Aurelia tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. I'll take you." St. Aurelia wasn't a hospital. It was a 5-star hotel with heart monitors. It was all warm woods, recessed lighting and quiet, zen-like gardens under glass. There were no armed guards, just quiet, competent staff who all seemed to know Luca by name. Nonna Detta was in a private suite with a view of a small waterfall. She was sitting up in bed, arguing with a nurse about the quality of the olive oil they'd served with her bread. "Ah, cara mia," she cried when she saw me, her face breaking into a million wrinkles. I ran to her, burying my face in her shoulder, breathing in her familiar scent of garlic and roses. She felt frail, but her grip on my arm was as strong as ever. "They treat me like a queen here," she whispered in my ear, her eyes sharp. "They brought me in a car so soft it felt like a cloud. This is because of you, because of the man." "Are you safe, Nonna? Are you scared?" "Safe," she laughed her dry, rattling laugh. "I am guarded like the Pope. Now tell me, this man, the one who watches." I looked back. Luca was standing outside the room, in the hallway, behind a pane of glass. He was giving us our privacy. He was just watching. His hands were clasped behind his back, patient, still. "He's complicated. Nonna..." She grabbed my hand, her papery skin tight on mine. She looked at me, her old eyes seeing right through my armor, right through the fear and the confusion. "You have the island heart, Marina. Even if you were not born on the island, you see the truth, you feel the music." She squeezed my hand. "Be careful, but do not be afraid." She kissed my forehead and whispered a very old, very potent blessing, a prayer for safe passage, for a calm sea. When I left the room 10 minutes later, I was crying, tears of relief, of fear, of a love so deep it ached. I walked into the hallway. Luca was still there, by the glass. He had seen it all. He had seen me break down in her arms, seen her bless me. I expected his face to be the same mask of stone. It wasn't. As I approached, his expression was shattered, the hardness was gone, the cold, quartz-like exterior had cracked. His gaze was soft, unguarded, and filled with a profound, aching understanding. He was looking at me not as a key, not as a consultant, but as just Marina. He saw the cost of what he was asking, and for the first time, I think he regretted having to ask me to pay it. He said nothing, just nodded, once, and we walked out. That night, back at Glass Ridge, the mood was heavy. The plan for the regatta was tomorrow. This was the final move. I was in my small room, clutching the wooden beads from Don Alfio. I couldn't sleep. I heard a sound in the main room. I peeked out. Luca was at his station, and he was wearing a shoulder holster. I'd never seen him with it on. I watched as he unclipped it, took the heavy, dark firearm out and ejected the clip. He checked the chamber. It was a fluid, practiced, terrifying motion. He opened a heavy-duty safe built into the wall. He placed the gun inside. He placed the holster inside. He placed the ammunition inside. He locked it. A heavy, definitive thud click. He was disarming himself, at least for tonight. He sat down at the main table, not with algorithms or bank statements, but with Dr. Umbra's printout of the La Crime de Mare musical score. He was staring at it, his brow furrowed, trying to read the notes, trying to understand the world he had pulled me into. Not just command it, he was trying to learn my language. I went back to my cot. I pulled out my phone, the secure one Ari had given me. My fingers were shaking, but for a completely different reason. I sent him a text. It was just 4 words. "Thanks for waiting." I set the phone down, my heart hammering. A moment later, it buzzed. A single word back. "Always." I turned off the light. And for the first time since I'd walked into that glittering ballroom, I wasn't afraid of the man in the next room. The Lake Michigan Regatta was the opposite of the Glass Ridge safe house. Where Glass Ridge was cold, silent, and steel, the regatta was a riot of noise, color and blinding sunlight. Hundreds of sailboats, their white sails flashing, dotted the bright blue water. Pennants snapped in the wind. The air smelled of lake water, sunscreen, and exhaust from the spectator yachts. This was Luca's play, his big public move, after Celine Coy, his lawyer, had worked for 2 days straight. Artemis Lines had discovered the century-old ledgers. They had presented the Blue Routes to the newly formed Port Integrity Commission, Juno Mires Commission, as a historical find, a legal, pre-existing shipping lane that would bypass the corrupt Marzano-controlled channels. Today was the announcement. I was standing on the deck of a massive, gleaming white yacht chartered by Artemis Lines. I was no longer Marina the waitress or Marina the consultant. In a simple, elegant navy blue dress Don Alfio had insisted on providing. I was just Marina, and I was completely exposed. "You look nervous, Cara," Don Alfio said, patting my hand. He was seated in a deck chair, looking every inch the benevolent patriarch. "There are 1,000 people here. 200 of them are press. You are safer here than you were in your own apartment." I wasn't so sure. Ari Sardo stood 10 feet away, her eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, her body language a tightly coiled spring. She was scanning the rooftops of the Navy Pier, the other boats, the crowd. She was the only one who looked as tense as I felt. Luca was at the bow, surrounded by journalists and smiling city officials. He was a different man today. He was charming. He was the legitimate CEO, the son of a respected Italian family, bringing new, clean business to Chicago. He was selling them the future. "This blue route isn't just a shipping lane, it's a promise," he was saying, his voice smooth and confident, a promise of transparency, of integrity. I saw a flash of electric blue at the gangplank. Giada Lynx. She was radiating confidence, her smile wide as she strode right up to Luca and kissed him on both cheeks, a purely European, purely public gesture. "Luca, darling," she exclaimed, loud enough for the press to hear. "Ventura Logistics is thrilled to partner in this. What a brilliant discovery. We must coordinate our promotional efforts. A truly clean port benefits us all, doesn't it?" I saw it for what it was. She'd lost her back-channel deal with Drex and Marzano, so she was pivoting, attaching herself to the winning side with shameless, predatory grace. Luca didn't blink. "Giada, we're so glad you see the value in transparency. We'll have our people talk." He dismissed her with a smile and turned. His eyes finding me in the crowd, the CEO mask dropped for just 1 second. His gaze was a question. "Are you okay?" I gave him the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. The music started. A live band tucked into the aft deck began to play. It was a classic, something from the 40s, a waltz. Luca extracted himself from the politicians, his duty done. He walked across the deck, his path straight and deliberate, right to me. He didn't look at Ari, he didn't look at his father, and he looked at me. He held out his hand. "Miss Vale, I believe they're playing our song." My breath hitched. It wasn't La Crime di Mare, it wasn't a lament, but the timing. The 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, it was the same rhythm. I placed my hand in his. His grip was warm and solid. He led me onto the small wooden dance floor set up on the deck. One hand held mine, the other settled on the small of my back. It was a proper, respectful distance, but I could feel the heat of his palm through the thin fabric of the dress. We began to move. We weren't just dancing. We were communicating. This was the first time we had touched, truly touched, since the night in the kitchen, since the morning at the hospital. This was a statement. In front of the press, the politicians, the sharks like Giada Lynx, and the hidden eyes of Marzano's men. He was claiming me. He was showing the world that I was under his protection. The outline was right. Words were few. Eyes were many. He was a beautiful dancer, not showy, just precise. He led with an effortless, coiled strength. I had been so wrong about him. He wasn't all force. He had learned subtlety. I followed his lead, our steps matching the beat. 1, 2, 3, chop, chop, stir, the rhythm from the kitchen. 1, 2, 3, the lilt from the lacrime melody. He looked down at me, his dark quartz eyes unreadable in the bright sunlight. "You're a natural, Marina." I just follow your lead," I whispered, my voice tight. "No," he murmured, his voice so low it was just a vibration against my hand. You never have. That's why you're still here." We circled the small floor, a perfect silent partnership. For just a moment, there was no Marzano, there was no safe house, there was just the sun, the music, and the solid, safe frame of the man holding me. I saw Ari over his shoulder. She was still scanning, still tense. Then she wasn't tense. She was moving. Her sunglasses were gone. Her eyes were fixed on a building on the pier, a half-mile away, the old Ferris wheel pavilion. "Boss!" Her voice was a sharp, clean crack, not a yell. She was running at us. "Marina, down!" She wasn't grabbing me. She was lunging, aiming to shove me. But Luca was faster. He had seen her eyes. He had seen the shift. He didn't wait to find the threat. He became the shield. In one violent, fluid motion, he broke the waltz. He spun me around, pulling my back hard against his chest, and used his own body as a wall, covering me completely. His arms were like steel bands around my waist. Phew crack! The sound was sharp, a supersonic snap followed by the thwack of splintering wood. I screamed, the crowd screamed. A hole, the size of a quarter, had appeared in the main mast of the yacht, not 10 feet from where we had been dancing. Splinters of polished mahogany rained down on the deck. The sniper's bullet. Luca didn't release me. He dragged me backward, pulling us both behind the solid steel bulk of the bar. "Ari, get him!" he roared, his voice no longer the smooth CEO. It was the general, the animal. Ari already had her weapon out, not a pistol, but her energy device pointing it not at the building, but at the sky. A drone. She was looking for the spotter. Security, Luca's men swarmed the deck, creating a moving wall of dark suits, pushing the panicked guests toward the cabins. "Get below, everyone below deck, now." Don Alfio was not moving. He was standing by his chair, his face a mask of cold, ancient fury. He wasn't looking for cover. He was staring toward the pier. One of his men, frantic, tried to pull him toward the stairs. Don Alfio shook him off. He walked to the band's abandoned microphone. He picked it up. The thump of the live mic echoed across the water. He didn't shout. His voice, amplified, cut through the screams. It was not English. It was the dialect. He spoke the old sea oath. "You, who hide in the rocks," he boomed, his voice like rolling thunder. "You have shed metal on the water. You have threatened a guest under my flag. You owe a debt to the sea. And the sea always collects with the wind." It wasn't a threat. It was a judgment. He had just declared war, in the old tongue, in front of God and the entire Chicago press corps. "We have to go," Luca hissed in my ear. He still had me pinned against the bulkhead. "This boat is a box. He'll have a second team." "How?" I gasped. "The dock is chaos." "Ari, exit." Ari was frantically scanning her tablet. "Blocked. They've jammed the gangplank. They knew we'd run." I looked around. The music was gone, but the sounds of the regatta were still there. The other boats, the horns. One of the spectator boats, a big ferry, was letting out a long blast, followed by 2 short ones. T-O-O-T, toot, toot, the letter D in Morse code. Another, smaller boat answered. Toot, toot, toot. Sa. They were just signaling, but T-O-O-T, toot, toot, T-O-O-T, T-O-O-T, D, G. "Doc?" "Ari!" I yelled, grabbing her arm. "The horns, it's Morse. That one, it just signaled D6, Dock 6, the old service pier." Ari's eyes met mine. No questions. She just nodded. "Boss, Dock 6, the service speedboat is there. It's our only way." "Go," Luca commanded. We didn't run. We moved as a unit. Luca in front, me locked to his back, Ari behind, her device sweeping the sky. We were down a service ladder, onto a lower deck, and then flying. We jumped the 4-foot gap onto the floating dock. A sleek, low-profile black speedboat was waiting. The keys were already in it. Luca hit the ignition. The engine roared to life, a deep, throaty growl. Ari cast off the lines, and we shot out of the slip, skipping over the choppy water, leaving the chaos of the yacht behind. "They're on us," Ari yelled, pointing skyward. 2 black drones, just like the one at the breakwater, were swooping down, gaining on us. "They'll track us to the safe house," Luca growled, pushing the throttle. "No, they won't," Ari said. She unzipped a heavy canvas bag. She pulled out a small, metallic box covered in antennae and slammed it onto the console. "This is new. A mobile Faraday field. It won't kill them, but it'll blind them. 3, 2, 1. She hit a switch. On her tablet, the feeds from the drones turned to static. "We're dark," she said. "They're deaf and blind. Go." Luca banked the boat hard, sending a plume of white spray into the air. He wasn't heading for the river. He was heading for the industrial harbors, the maze of old, rusted-out canals. He cut the engine 10 minutes later. We glided into a dark, enclosed space, a covered wooden boat slip, hidden beneath a forgotten warehouse. The sound of the engine died, and the silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of water lapping against the hull. I was shaking, not from fear, from the release. I had the sniper's bullet, the waltz, the sea oath all rattling in my head. Ari stayed at the bow, her weapon up, watching the entrance. Luca killed the lights. We were plunged into near darkness. He sat in the captain's chair, his hand still gripping the wheel. He was breathing hard, the adrenaline leaving him. He was silent for a long, long time. Then, his voice, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "Are you afraid of me, Marina?" The question I had been dreading, the question he had been afraid to ask. I looked at his silhouette, the man who had used me as a key, who had put me in a dress and danced with me, who had just used his own body to stop a bullet. "No," I whispered, and I realized, with a sudden, shocking clarity, that it was the truth. "No, Luca, I'm not afraid of you." I took a shaky breath. "I'm afraid of this, the bullets, the snipers, the ledgers. I'm afraid of what you hide, the parts of your world I can't see, but I'm not afraid of you." He turned in his chair. I could barely see his face in the dim light filtering through the rotten boards. He nodded. Once, a slow, heavy gesture. "I hide it," he said, his voice raw, stripped of all its armor, "because I don't want you to see it." "Why?" "My younger brother, Dante," he said. The name was like a stone dropping into the water. He was 19. He was like you. He liked music. He wasn't this. He gestured to the dark slip, the weapon in Ari's hands. He was soft. "What happened?" I whispered. "Marzano, about 6 years ago, it was a message to my father, a discussion about territory. Marzano's men were supposed to scare him, a warning. But Marzano, he doesn't have control. He doesn't understand subtlety. He uses a sledgehammer to tap a nail. The warning, it went too far. He stopped. He didn't need to finish. The cold, calculating, controlled Luca Lucenti. It wasn't a choice. It was a reaction. It was a wall built around a wound. "My coldness," he whispered, looking at his own hands. "It's not a decision. It's what's left. It's the promise I made, that I would never lose control, that I would never let him hurt anyone in my family again, that I would always be clean, precise, and that I would burn his entire world to the ground." His grief was a living thing in the small boat, a cold fire. It was the heat I'd felt from him at the gala. It was the core of the volcano. I didn't think. I just moved. I stood up and walked the 2 steps to his chair. He didn't flinch. He just watched me. I placed my hand very gently on his chest, right over his heart. I could feel it, thump, 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 hard and fast, beating against my palm, the heart of the man who had locked his own weapons in a safe so he wouldn't scare me. He looked at my hand, then at my face. He was so close. The air was thick with the smell of lake water, engine oil, and the sharp, metallic scent of his adrenaline. He slowly raised his own hand and covered mine, his fingers lacing with mine, pressing my palm flat against his chest. His gaze dropped to my mouth. One breath, that was all that separated us. One small movement. I saw the question in his eyes. I saw the need, the longing for 1 second of warmth in his cold, controlled life. I wanted to be that for him. But I looked past him, to the sliver of light at the entrance to the slip, to Ari, standing guard. "Luca," I whispered. He closed his eyes. He knew. "There's still work to do," I said. He let out a long, shuddering breath. He nodded, his forehead resting against mine for just 1 second, a promise. Then he released my hand and turned back to the console. All business once more. "Ari, report. Where did they go?" He was the general again. But I knew. I had felt his heart, and he had shown me his. The quiet of the hidden boathouse was a lifetime ago. We had returned to Glass Ridge, but the spell was broken. The shared breath in the dark, the touch of his hand on my heart, it was all sealed away. Luca was the general again, and I was his asset. The war was back on, colder than ever. The high-stakes victory at the regatta, the public announcement of the blue roots, felt hollow. It was a punch, but it wasn't a knockout. We had exposed the roots, but Marzano still had his network, his money, and his reach. "He's quiet," Luca said, staring at a bank of monitors. It was 3 a.m. Too quiet. He took the shot. He missed. Now he's recalculating. "I've got something." Ari Sarto's voice was tight. She hadn't slept in 2 days. She had been reverse engineering the drone parts from the breakwater, cross-referencing the signal that had jammed the yacht's comms. "The attack at the regatta," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "The sniper was a decoy. The real attack was digital. The jammer wasn't just a jammer. It was a Trojan horse. It was trying to breach our network." "Did it?" Luca's voice was flat. "No, but it was from our network." The silence in the room was absolute. I stopped breathing. "What do you mean from?" Luca asked, his voice lethally soft. "The breach code," Ari said, her face grim. "It used an authorization key, a very, very old one, from an internal Artemis account, a ghost fund." Luca was at her side in an instant. "Which one?" "The Nautilus protocol," Ari whispered. I didn't understand, but Luca looked like he had been struck. It wasn't the volcanic anger I'd seen him aim at Marzano. This was a cold, sick void. This was the shock of betrayal. "Tiberio," Luca breathed. The name was a curse. "Tiberio Quill," Ari confirmed, bringing up a photo, a smiling, silver-haired man in an expensive suit, shaking Luca's hand at a past gala. "Your chief financial advisor. He's been leaking your shipping schedules to Nordson Finance to Marzano for 6 months. He's getting a percentage of their operation." The man who handled Luca's money, his legacy, was the traitor. "It gets worse," Ari said, her voice strained. "Quill isn't just playing for Marzano. He's playing for a bigger fish. The Nordson payments are a smokescreen. The real money, the real communication, it's going here." She pulled up another file, a name, Judge Hollister Gray. I recognized him. He was one of the politicians at the regatta, smiling and shaking Luca's hand. "Hollister Gray, hi," Luca said, his voice a low growl of comprehension. "He's been trying to get a seat on the oversight board for the MHIC for years. He wants to control the port. He's using Marzano as his muscle and Quill as his banker. He wants to burn Juno Mir's clean commission to the ground and build his own kingdom on the ashes." My mind was reeling. This wasn't a street war. This was a coup, fought with algorithms, stock options, and judges. While they mapped out the new political battlefield, I was staring at the music, the La Crime de Mare, Doctor. Umbra and I had been listening to it for days. But now, I was listening to something else. A recording of Nonna Chetta from the hospital. The blessing she had given me. "The blessing," I whispered. "What, Doctor?" Umbra looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "The lilt," I said, my heart starting to hammer. "Nona's lilt. It's not one lilt. It changes. The The song lilt is one way, but the one she used for the blessing, the notes are the same. But the intention, the way she bends the note, it's different, it's warmer. An emotional key, Umbra was skeptical. Oh, put it through the audio map, I urged. Please, use the recording from the hospital. He isolated the audio of her blessing and ran it against the coordinate map. The map flickered and changed. The blue roots were still there, in blue, but now a new set of lines appeared, branching off, hidden under the main ones. They were thinner, fainter, like a network of capillaries. My God, Umbra breathed. It's a second layer. The public roots are the arteries. This is the lifeboat network, the escape hatches, hidden channels that only this blessing inflection can reveal. I looked at Luca. Quill doesn't know about this. He only knows the routes you showed the world. Luca's eyes, which had been dead with betrayal, slowly lit with a cold, hard fire. He's about to... The plan was hatched in 10 minutes. It was surgical. Quill thinks he's selling the routes, Luca said. We'll let him. We'll create a ghost shipment, a test run, something irresistible. The North Atlantic Aid Fund, I said, the name just popping into my head. A fake charity, untouchable. Perfect, Luca said. Quill will feed the route to Marzano and Gray as the first off-book shipment. They'll try to seize it. But how do we listen, I asked. I held up the ceramic amulet. This was the key. Can it be the microphone? Ari Sardo gave a rare, thin smile. I can make it broadcast a signal that would deafen a bat. But we need a distraction, Luca said. They'll be watching me. They'll be watching the shipment. We need a spectacle. Something to make them look the other way. His eyes landed on me. Giada Lynx was all too happy to help. Eager to cement her new alliance with the winning side, she set up a massive live-streamed press conference for the next day. The theme, Marina Vale, the voice of the island, preserving Chicago's cultural heritage. I was the bait, and I was the smokescreen. The next day, I was in a different kind of safe house, a high-rise office belonging to one of Luca's legitimate holdings. I was standing in a darkened observation room, looking through a two-way mirror into a pristine, sunlit conference room. My heart was a quiet, steady drum against my ribs. This wasn't fear. It was resolve. He's here, Ari whispered. I watched as Tiberio Quill walked in, smiling, accepting an espresso from Luca. Tiberio, Luca said, his voice perfectly calm, echoing over the speaker in my room. Thanks for coming. The routes are live. The pick is a complication. This North Atlantic Fund. It's sensitive. I need to move it quietly. Your way. Quill smiled, the picture of smooth confidence. Luca, you're still thinking small. The pick Juno Meyer. They're paper tigers. They're manageable. Your problem is you're still playing your father's game. Quill leaned forward. I held my breath. You're playing with morality, with legacy. It's so slow, Quill sneered. You don't win by following the law. He tapped the table, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But the amulet in Luca's breast pocket caught every syllable. You win by writing it, and I've got the pen. Hollister Gray, he is the new M. Shiki. He's the new law. And you're either on his books, or you're a footnote. I gripped the wooden beads in my pocket, the ones Don Alfio's wife had worn. I watched the man who had broken bread with the Lucenti family condemn them, his face smug, his future secured. In the dark room, Ari Sardo didn't celebrate. She simply hit send. The entire crystal-clear audio file was now in the possession of Juno Mire at the Port Integrity Commission. The clean side of the MHIC and the new pick were now officially and secretly allied. The trap was sprung. At the exact same time, two other moves were being made. Across town, in the press club, Giada Lynx was introducing me to a bank of cameras. I was on a stage, talking about Nonna Chetta, about Agrodolce, about how music holds memory. I was the face of cultural heritage, a complete diversion. And in a quiet social club in Little Village, Don Alfio was doing the real work. He had called the old table. As Luca had explained, they weren't mobsters. They were the elders, the bakers, the priests, the union bosses, the old women who still made the bread, the conscience of the community. He was playing them the music. He was asking them, not for power, but for authority, to publicly declare the Lacrime di Mare and its variants a protected cultural artifact of the Sicilian diaspora. He was taking it out of the hands of criminals and giving it to history. After the sting, after my press conference, we were back at Glass Ridge. Quill was still out there, clueless, thinking he had just sealed his deal with Gray. Luca stood by the window, looking out at nothing. "It's done," he said. "Juno Miri has the audio. They'll arrest Gray and Quill in the morning when they try to seize the charity shipment," I said. "We won." "That was just a battle," he said. He turned to me. "Celine Coy is at the federal building right now. She's filing the new charter. Artemis Lines were handing over the entire Blue Route ledger. All of it. The public routes, the hidden ones, everything. To the Port Integrity Commission. We're going 100% public. Full transparency. Full PIC supervision." I was stunned. "But that's your family's secret. That's your leverage. You're your entire inheritance." "It was an inheritance," he said, his voice heavy. "It became a cage. Marzano. Gray, they only want it because it's in the dark. I'm turning on the floodlights. You can't steal what's given away. It's the only way to be clean." He was doing it. He was choosing to dismantle his own shadow empire, to protect his father, to honor his brother, and I realized to keep his promise to me. The weight of his sacrifice settled on me. He was giving up his power. The moment of peace, of profound victory, lasted exactly 3 seconds. A red alert flashed on Ari Sarto's main console. A high priority, critical warning. "Boss," she said, her voice terrifyingly calm. "What is it?" Luca was instantly at her side. "It's Saint Aurelia, Nonna Shetta." My blood turned to ice. I grabbed the console. "Is it her heart, did she?" "No," Ari said, her face white. "Her heart monitor didn't fail. It's offline. The entire wing's security feed just looped 4 minutes ago. A private ambulance, a priority transfer vehicle, it left the grounds." An ambulance, Luca was already dialing. It wasn't one of ours," Ari said, her hands flying, trying to find a signal. "It was a fake. Boss, they took her." "Marzano." Luca's voice was a low, primal growl. He wasn't the CEO. He wasn't the general. He was the animal. He knows he lost. He knows Quill is blown. He's not playing for the routes. He's burning the board. I couldn't breathe. My knees buckled. Nonna, he had her. All the plans, the ledgers, the arrests, none of it mattered. "I can't track it," Ari was saying, her voice strained with desperation. "The vehicle is shielded. It's running dark. It could be anywhere in the city by now." Scan all frequencies," Luca roared. "Scan for anything." "I'm trying. It's just static all across the band." A blast of white noise filled the room, and then, through the static, I heard it. A voice, faint, humming. It wasn't Lacrime di Mare, it was a nursery rhyme, a stupid, simple little song about a crooked man who found a crooked sixpence, a song Nonna Chetta used to sing to me when I was 5, when I fell and scraped my knee, a song only we knew. She was humming. She must have found a radio, a comms button, something. "That's her!" I screamed, grabbing Ari's chair. "That's Nonna!" "It's just a nursery rhyme. Marina, I can't—" "Listen," I yelled. "Listen to the lilt!" She wasn't just humming, she was coding it. She was changing the notes, bending the melody, using the same blessing inflection from the hospital, the inflection for the escape routes. She was singing a nursery rhyme, but she was giving us a map. "Ari, put that audio through the map," I shouted, my voice cracking. "Put it through the second layer map. She's telling us where she is. Right now, it's working." "Doctor," Umbra's voice, tinny and frantic over the car's speakers, was the only thing cutting through the roar of the engine. Back at Glass Ridge, Ari and Umbra were frantically running Nonna's humming nursery rhyme, The Crooked Man, through the audio mapping software. "It's not a route, Luca," Umbra yelled. "It's a single pulsing coordinate. She's stationary. "Where?" Luca's voice was a low growl. He had retrieved his firearm from the safe before we'd left. The general was gone. The animal, the one who'd lost his brother, was driving. "South suburbs," Ari's voice cut in, sharp and clear. "An abandoned commercial project. It went bankrupt a decade ago. It's called Sky Garden, a massive biodome, a glass conservatory, right off the highway." My blood turned to ice. A glass house, a greenhouse. "It's a trap, Luca," I whispered, my hands cold. "He's not hiding her. He's luring us there. He wants us to see." "Oh, of course it's a trap," Luca snapped, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "It's his last move. He's lost his money. He's lost his political cover. All he has left is spite." He was pushing the armored sedan to its limit. The city lights were a smear behind us. Then the sky ripped open. It wasn't just rain. It was a biblical deluge, a solid wall of water that the wipers, even on high, couldn't defeat. We were on Route 41, the highway vanishing into a black, reflective river. The car hit a patch of standing water. We were suddenly weightless, a 2-ton metal box hydroplaning, sliding sideways in the dark. I saw the concrete median coming at us. Luca didn't flinch. He didn't brake. He just turned into the skid, his hands a blur, fighting the wheel, forcing the car back under his control. The tires screamed and finally, sickeningly, gripped the pavement. We were straight. I let out a breath I hadn't even known I was holding. "Luca, stop!" My voice was shaking. We don't stop. We don't stop until I have her." He was staring into the wall of rain, a man possessed. "You can't save her if we're wrapped around a pole," I shouted over the storm. "We just slid across 3 lanes. Even this tank can't beat a flood. Please, just for a minute, let the worst of it pass." He hit the steering wheel with his open palm, a single, violent crack of frustration. 5 minutes, he growled. He took the next exit, pulling into the flickering neon tragedy of a roadside motel, the Sleep Tight Inn. The sign was broken. The inn part was dark. It just promised sleep tight. We ran from the car to the door of room 12. The rain was freezing, hitting us like tiny, sharp needles. By the time he'd fumbled with the key card and shoved the door open, we were soaked to the bone. The room was a symphony of beige and brown. It smelled of mildew, stale cigarettes, and despair. Luca slammed the door. He locked the deadbolt. He shoved the room's single, flimsy chair under the knob. He stalked to the window, peering through the blinds. He was a caged tiger, dripping on the thin, damp carpet. I was shivering, my teeth chattering. It wasn't just the cold. It was the adrenaline crash, the bone-deep terror for Nona. I went straight to the rattling, ancient heater unit under the window and cranked the dial to high. It roared to life, blasting a stream of hot, dusty air. Then I walked to the window, right past Luca. I pulled the thin, ugly polyester curtains shut. The flickering neon vanished, plunging the room into a dim, quiet brown. I turned to face him. He had stopped pacing, and he was just standing there, in the middle of the room, water streaming from his hair, pooling at his feet, the mask of the general, the cold CEO. It was gone. He just looked broken, a man at the absolute end of his rope. "We'll wait for the rain to slow," I said softly. He just nodded, his eyes fixed on the door, as if he could burn a hole through it and see Marzano. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand his pain. I walked over to him, my own clothes plastered to my skin. I gently, carefully touched his arm. He flinched, as if he'd been burned. His muscles were rock hard, vibrating with a tension that was almost electric. "Luca." He looked at me, and his eyes were hollow. "It's okay to be scared," I whispered. "I'm not scared," when he snapped, his voice rough. "You are," I said, my voice firm but quiet. "You're terrified. You're terrified you'll fail her, the way you feel you failed Dante." That broke him. The word. His brother's name. A sound left his throat, a low, agonized groan. He didn't move, but all the anger, all the fight just drained away, leaving him exposed. He was just a man, soaking wet, freezing cold, and carrying a weight that would have crushed a dozen others. He stood a breath away. I could feel the cold radiating from his wet jacket, but underneath it, I could feel the furnace of him. He slowly, so slowly, raised a hand. It was trembling. He brushed the wet hair back from my cheek, his fingers icy cold. "Are you sure?" he whispered. The question hung in the dusty, quiet air. It wasn't about the plan. It wasn't about the risk. It was about this, about us. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I want you, Luca," I finally managed, the words catching. But I want the safety and the respect, too. I want the man who locked his guns in the safe, not the one who just checked them in the car." A small, pained smile just barely touched his lips. "He's not here. The general isn't here." "Good," I whispered. "I don't want the general." I leaned in and touched my forehead to his. We just stood there, breathing, the sound of the rain on the roof, the rattle of the heater, and our two quiet, shaky breaths, in, out. His hands came up to cup my face, his thumbs gently brushing the rain from my cheeks. His skin was cold, but his touch was a brand. Then he kissed me. It wasn't the fast, desperate kiss of a man on his way to war. It was slow. It was searching. It was filled with a tenderness that felt like it had been locked away for a lifetime. It was every promise we'd made in the boathouse, every shared glance in the kitchen, every rhythm we'd shared. My hands, which had been frozen at my sides, came up to grip his shoulders, his arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against him, a solid, anchoring force. I could feel the hard, steady beat of his heart against my chest. It wasn't frantic. It was just there, a foundation. We broke apart, both of us breathless. His eyes, the dark quartz, were no longer hard. They were liquid. And he looked at me with that same shattered vulnerability I'd seen at the hospital. "Marina," he breathed like it was a prayer. He kissed me again, and this time there was fire. It was the heat I'd felt from him at the gala, the heat from the kitchen. But it wasn't burning at me. It was burning for me. His hands tangled in my hair, mine in his, and I felt our pulses, his in his neck, mine in my own, thumping at the exact same rhythm. Thump, 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 a single shared heartbeat. Later, we were lying on top of the ugly, quilted bedspread. The heater was rattling. The rain had softened to a steady drum. We were still in our damp clothes, but we weren't cold anymore. I was curled against his side, my head on his chest, his arm a heavy, secure weight around me. "What happens after?" I whispered into his sweater. "After we get her. After Gray and Marzano, what's left?" He was quiet for a long, long time. I could feel the rumble in his chest as he finally spoke. "I gave away the routes, all of them. The blue routes will be a public trust, run by the pick. My father, he's old. He just wants peace. He wants to listen to his music." "And you," I asked, "what do you want? Not the CEO, not the general, Luca." He sighed. "I want to get out, to take the name Lucenti and just make it a name again. Not a cage. I want to—" He paused. "You want to learn how to make good espresso," I finished for him, a small smile touching my lips. I felt his chest shake with that quiet, rusty laugh. "Yes, I want to make good espresso." "I want to open a center," I said, my voice soft. "An island language center for people like Nona, to save the stories, the songs, to give them a place to be heard." He tightened his arm around me. We'll build it." "That's a promise." "It's a foundation," he replied. I reached for my phone, the secure one on the nightstand. I found the file, the La Crime di Mare. I played it, the volume low, the haunting, tinny melody filling the dark room. I hummed along, the blessing lilt. Luca took my free hand. He didn't squeeze it. He just, with his index finger, gently tapped out the rhythm of the song on the inside of my wrist. Tap, 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 tap. It was a wordless, binding promise. "I hear you. I am with you." My phone buzzed. A text. It was from Ari. Sky Garden. Dawn. 5 a.m. He's moving her then. The whole dome is on an automated system. Solar panels, the doors, the vents, they all lock permanently at sunrise. It's a glass prison, and he's locking her in it. The warmth in the room evaporated. The cold was back. I showed the text to Luca. He sat up. The soldier was back. All tenderness was gone, replaced by cold, hard metal. Dawn, he said, that's in 3 hours. He's not just trapping her. He's setting a timer. He knows we're coming. How do we get in? I asked, sitting up, pulling my own jacket around my shoulders. If the doors are automated, he'll have the system locked down. The doors, Luca said, his mind racing, pulling on his boots. The plans Ari pulled, they're magnetic locks. Heavy duty. They'd hold against a truck. But they're magnetic, I said, my hand flying to the ceramic amulet around my neck. Doctor, Umbra, the amulet. He said it could create a high-frequency pulse, an acoustic resonance. Can it rattle the magnetic plate? Just for a second, just enough to break the seal. Luca's eyes lit up. It could. If we hit the exact right frequency, it's a key. It's always been the key. But she's in there, Luca said, his face hardening. We can't just walk in. It's a glass dome. Marzano will have men everywhere. He'll see us coming a mile away. We need a way to guide her, to tell her where we are. I grabbed my phone again. I hit record. I started to hum, The Crooked Man, the nursery rhyme, the exact variant she had sung in the ambulance, the one only she and I knew. A path of audio breadcrumbs. We'll play this on a mini speaker, I said, my voice shaking but firm. He'll think it's just static, but she'll hear it. She'll know it. She'll know which way to go. Luca stood up. He paused, his back to me. Marina, he said, his voice flat. Plan B. What? If the locks don't break, if he sees her, if he threatens her. He turned to face me. I'm going in, and I'm making a trade. What? No, Luca, you're not. He wants me. Marina, he's always wanted me. My life for hers. It's a clean trade. You get her out, Ari gets you both. No. I was on my feet, grabbing the front of his jacket. Absolutely not. You don't get to do that. You don't get to trade your life. You don't get to leave me. It's the only way to guarantee. You promised me, I was yelling now. Tears of rage and fear in my eyes. You promised me a foundation. You promised me a life. You don't get to die for us. You have to live for us. You have to stay. You have to see this through. With me. He stared at me, his eyes wide, the sheer force of my will hitting him like a physical blow. He'd been ready to die. He hadn't been ready for me to fight for him. Promise me, I whispered, my voice breaking. Promise me you'll live. No trades. We get her. And we both walk out. Promise me, Luca. He looked at my hands, gripping his jacket. He looked at my face, streaked with new tears. He covered my hands with his. I promise, he said. His voice was hoarse. We stood there, hands clasped, our foreheads pressed together again. The passion was gone, the terror was still there. But underneath it, something new had formed. It was hard, it was clear, it was rational. It was courage. Let's go, he said. Let's go get our family. The first pale gray light of dawn was just beginning to touch the sky as we approached Sky Garden. It wasn't a building, it was a scar, a monument to some forgotten billionaire's ego. The rain from the motel had passed, leaving a thick, cold mist that clung to the ground. The dome rose out of it, its hundreds of curved glass panes slick and iridescent in the pre-dawn light. It looked exactly like the scales of a sleeping dragon. Ari killed the headlights a full mile out. We approached on foot, the mud sucking at our boots, the promise I had extracted from Luca in that cheap motel room hanging heavy and silent between us. He was all general now. He stopped us at the edge of the dead, landscaped perimeter, raising a small thermal monocular. 2, he whispered, his voice flat. All the warmth from the motel room gone, replaced by ice. On the central support beams, north and west, snipers. Marzano wasn't just trapping us. He was planning an execution. Ari unslung her heavy bag. She didn't have weapons out. She pulled out two collapsible, tripod-mounted devices. They looked like small, warped satellite dishes, polished to a mirror shine. "Refractive shields," she murmured, positioning them at the edge of the access path. "They won't make us invisible, but they'll bend the ambient light to the security cameras. We'll just look like a heat shimmer, a smudge on the lens. It's too analog for their system to flag as a threat." "It won't work on the snipers," Lucas stated, his eyes on the dome. "It doesn't have to," Ari replied. "It just gets us to the door. We stay in the shadows of the foundation. Go." We moved in a low crouch, a three-person shadow, until we were pressed against the base of the massive glass wall. The main entrance was a set of towering glass doors, held shut by a black, heavy-duty magnetic lock. "Clock," Lucas said. Ari glanced at her wrist. 4:58. Sunrise is 5:03. We have less than 5 minutes before this entire place locks down permanently. This was my part. I pulled out the mini speaker from the motel, the one with my recording of the Crooked Man nursery rhyme. Ari had already wired the ceramic amulet from my neck to its input, turning my fragile piece of history into a focused acoustic driver. The frequency from the amulet, the lilt from the blessing, it has to be perfect. Marina. "Doctor," Umbra's voice crackled in my earpiece from Glass Ridge. "You have to create a perfect sympathetic resonance to vibrate the lock plate." I didn't just press play. I had to do it. The system needed the live modulation of my voice. I pressed the device against the glass, right next to the lock. I took a deep, shuddering breath. My promise from Luca pounding in my head. Live for us. I closed my eyes and sang. It wasn't the lament, it was the blessing. My voice, amplified by the amulet, wasn't music. It was a high-pitched, vibrating, keening sound that I felt in my teeth and my bones. The glass wall thrummed, the sound echoing, building on itself. The magnetic lock began to buzz, a horrible, grinding, high-frequency scream. Thud clack. The lock sprang open. Luca shoved the door open and pulled me in after him. Ari was last, grabbing her refractive shields and collapsing them. We were in... The air was warm, thick, and suffocating. It smelled of jasmine, mold, and damp earth. It was a dead jungle. Palm trees drooped, their fronds brown. Exotic flowers had rotted on the vine. I switched the speaker's function. The high-pitched key stopped, in its place. I played the recording, the low, humming melody of the Crooked Man nursery rhyme, my audio breadcrumbs. We moved fast, following the sound of our own guide. "Nona?" I whispered, my voice raw. We found her in the center of the dome, near a massive concrete planter filled with withered, skeletal wild orange trees. She was tied to a cast-iron bench. She was pale, her eyes huge in the dim light, but she was alive. She was furious. "Nona," I ran, stumbling over the dead vines, and cut the rough ropes on her wrists with the knife Ari had given me. I sank to my knees and buried my face in her lap. "Oh, God, sto bene, I'm here." She gripped my hair, her fingers surprisingly strong. I sang, "Cara mia," she whispered, her voice a rough rasp. "I knew you would hear the music." What a touching reunion, brought a tear to my eye, almost. The voice was amplified, echoing through the dome's hidden speakers. Tiberio Quill. He stepped out from behind a stand of dead, brown bamboo, flanked by two of Marzano's men. He was wearing a suit, and he was holding a small, black device with a red button, a detonator. "Did you really think this was just about the routes?" "Luca," Quill sneered, his smug face illuminated by the graying light. "The routes are just plumbing. I wanted the house. Judge Gray and I were privatizing the entire port. Marzano gets the plumbing, and we get the deed. And you get to be a ghost." He always did have an inflated sense of self-worth. Tiberio. The new voice was calm, cutting, and impossible. Don Alfio. He stepped out from the shadows of a massive, dry waterfall feature. He was alone. His silver-headed cane rested lightly in his hand. Luca's blood ran cold. I felt it. "Father, get out! It's a trap!" "Of course it's a trap," Don Alfio said, his eyes, sharp as broken glass, fixed on Quill. "But it's my trap, not yours. You think I let my chief financial advisor betray my family for 6 months without noticing?" A guttural roar came from a high catwalk above us. Marzano. He was standing next to one of his snipers, his face purple with rage. "Old man, you're finished. Your routes are public. Your man is ours. Your son is dead. Everyone dies." "Luca," Don Alfio commanded, his voice sharp, cutting through Marzano's rant. "The glass. Remember the glass. No stray shots." He looked at the snipers high above. "One bullet, one single bullet, and this entire dome shatters. The pressure variance will kill us all." Luca's hand was on his holstered firearm, his face a mask of agony. His promise to me. His father. Nona. He was trapped. But I wasn't. My eyes darted to the speaker Quill was using, the main amplification system. I still had my mini-speaker, my amulet. I ran to the central control panel, a mess of wires and dust. I saw the aux input. I jammed my speaker's plug into the socket. I hit the switch, not the nursery rhyme, the key, the high-pitched, resonant, bone-rattling frequency. This time, it didn't just come from my tiny speaker, it blasted through the entire dome. The effect was instantaneous. The snipers on the high steel beams screamed and grabbed their heads, their rifles clattering as they lost their balance. Marzano roared in pain, clutching his temples. His men on the ground stumbled, disoriented and nauseated by the vibrating air. Marzano recovered first, enraged. He saw Don Alfio, standing alone, unprotected. He lunged, pulling a long, wicked knife. He grabbed the Don from behind, pulling him back, the blade instantly at his throat. "Stop the noise or the old man dies," he screamed. Luca didn't hesitate. He didn't fire his gun. His hand blurred. A small, perfectly balanced throwing knife, one I hadn't even known he was carrying, flew through the air. It spun once and thwacked into the back of Marzano's knife hand. Marzano screamed, his hand spasming open, the knife clattering harmlessly to the glass floor. A few bright red drops followed it, stark against the gray tile. In that single, breathtaking second, Luca was moving, not to attack, but to defend. He shoved his father clear, putting himself between the Don and Marzano. "If I can't have it, no one can," Tiberio Quill shrieked, his face a mask of terror and spite. He slammed his thumb on the red button of the detonator. A deafening, muffled thump. It wasn't a blast. The reinforced, laminated glass of the dome flexed, absorbing the concussion. It didn't shatter, but the shockwave sent Quill staggering backward, his ears ringing. Ari Sarto, who had been moving like a ghost through the chaos, was on him. She didn't pause. Her movements were a brutal, efficient blur. She disarmed him, and I heard the sharp click of her zip ties pulling tight. Quill was neutralized. "We have to go now," Luca yelled, grabbing my arm. The system was failing, alarms starting to blare. I grabbed Nonna Chetta, pulling her to her feet. She was surprisingly steady. "Let's go. Mia cara," she said, as if we were late for church. The remaining henchmen, recovering from the noise, charged us. Don Alfio stepped in their path. He didn't run. He just stood. He held his silver-headed cane not like a walking stick, but like a quarterstaff. He blocked the first man, a sharp, solid crack of silver on bone. He was a warrior. "Go!" he roared, blocking a second man. "I will follow. Get them out!" He wasn't a frail old man. He was a lion, his eyes blazing, and he was buying us time. We ran, me pulling Nonna, Luca, his gun now out, covering our retreat, Ari dragging a bound and gagged Tiberio Quill. We burst through the main glass doors onto the wide, tiled terrace outside, breathing in the cold, clean morning air. And right at that second, the sun's first ray crested the horizon. A loud electronic bell tolled, "Bong!" Behind us, the heavy glass doors hissed shut. Thud. A final, definitive clack as the magnetic locks engaged for the day. We were out. Don Alfio, Marzano, and his men were in... We stood on the terrace, gasping for breath. "Don't move hands in the air, all of you." We were surrounded. My heart sank. It wasn't police. It was a private army. Men in black tactical gear, their faces hidden by masks, all holding assault weapons. They had no insignia. They were ghosts. Judge Hollister Gray stepped out from behind the line of men. He was wearing a pristine pinstripe suit, not a speck of mud on his polished shoes. He was smiling. In his gloved hand, he held a single official-looking document. Luca Lucenti, Marina Vale, Ari Sarto. His voice was smooth, pleasant, and utterly terrifying. By the authority of the Interlake Judicial Compact, an authority I just signed into effect this morning, you are all under arrest for corporate terrorism, kidnapping, and conspiracy. He smiled, a reptilian gesture. It's a baseless warrant, of course, but you won't live to see a courtroom to challenge it. Take them. Hollister Gray's smile was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. It was the calm, placid smile of a man who had already won, who was just reading the minutes of a meeting that had concluded in his favor. A baseless warrant, he repeated, savoring the words as his private army fanned out, their weapons all trained on us. Luca was a coiled spring beside me, his hand on his firearm, but he was outnumbered 20-1. Ari was in a similar standoff, her eyes scanning for an angle that didn't exist. "You've been a thorn in my side for a long time, Lucenti," Gray said, stepping forward. "And you." He looked at me, his smile wavering, replaced by a cold disgust. "You, the little waitress. You and your music. You've cost me hundreds of millions of dollars. You've undone decades of work." He raised his hand, a signal for his men to advance. "But the Interlake Compact gives me full authority over port-related security threats. And you all, you look like a threat to me. Take them. We'll process them offshore." Offshore, he was going to make us disappear. I stepped forward. "Marina, no." Luca grabbed my arm. "It's okay," I said. I looked at Judge Hollister Gray. My hand wasn't shaking. My voice was clear. "You're right, Judge. It is about the law. You should always follow the law." I was holding my mini-speaker, the amulet still wired to it. "What is this?" Gray sneered. "Going to sing me to death?" "No," I said, and I pressed play. It wasn't music. It was Tiberio Quill's voice, amplified, echoing across the misty terrace. "You win by writing it, and I've got the pen. Hollister Gray, he is the new Emic. He's the new law. And you're either on his books or you're a footnote." Gray's face went from smug to confused to bone white, ashen terror. He stared at my little speaker, then at the sky, as if he could see his own words hanging in the air. What is that?" he sputtered. "That," a new, sharp voice cut through the air, "is Exhibit A. Judge Gray, you are under arrest." A second wave of people stormed the terrace, but these weren't private soldiers. They were an official MHIC and Port Integrity Commission windbreakers. They were armed, professional, and they moved with the authority of the real law. Leading them was Juno Meyer, her face like a sheet of ice, her gun trained not on us, but on Gray. "But how?" Gray stammered, looking at the sky. "My men—" "Your men are on an unsecured frequency, Judge," Juno snapped. "And my team received a very musical anonymous tip, the one that, as of 30 seconds ago, was just live-streamed by an embedded journalist." A third figure stepped out from behind the PIC team, Giada Lynx. She wasn't smiling. She was holding a professional broadcast camera, its red recording light blazing. "Your entire confession, Judge," Giada said, her voice smooth as silk, "is currently the #1 breaking news story in Chicago. My cultural heritage piece got a dramatic upgrade. You're trending." Gray's private army, leaderless, confused, and now facing a superior legal force, lowered their weapons. It was over. But Marzano wasn't part of Gray's plan. He was just an animal. Seeing his allies collapse, seeing the police, he panicked. He did the only thing he knew how. He grabbed the closest leverage. "Non et cetera." He lunged for her, pulling her from my side, the same long, wicked knife he'd pulled on Don Alfio now pressed against her throat. "Stay back," he roared, his eyes wild, spittle flying from his lips. All of you, cops, feds. I don't care I walk out of here, or she dies." Nona, frail, terrified, looked at him. She looked at the man who had stolen her from her bed, and she spoke. She didn't plead. She didn't cry. She spat the malocchio at him, the full curse, the one I had only whispered. She spoke of salt turning to glass, of an empty sea, of a grave with no name. It was so vicious, so filled with ancient, righteous fury, that Marzano flinched. His hand, the one with the knife, wavered for just 1/2 second. It was all Luca needed. He didn't trade. He didn't bargain. He moved. He lunged forward, not at the knife, but at Nona. He grabbed her, spinning her out of Marzano's grasp, shielding her with his own body. Marzano roared and slashed, the blade intended for Nona's heart burying itself deep in Luca's shoulder. Luca didn't make a sound. He just shoved Nona hard toward me. "Get her," he commanded, his voice strained. I grabbed her, pulling her behind me, just as Don Alfio stepped forward. The old Don, his face a mask of terrible calm, walked right up to the now disarmed Marzano. Marzano, his knife stuck in Luca's shoulder, was weaponless. He raised his fists. Don Alfio looked at him, not with hate, but with a cold, final judgment. "You don't understand the island, bastardo," the Don said, his voice quiet. "You don't understand the law. The sea does not tolerate a man who puts his hands on an elder. The sea drowns him." He didn't wait. He raised his silver-headed cane. It wasn't a feeble tap. It was a warrior's final blow, a single, solid, sickening crack as he brought it down, not in anger, but in judgment. Marzano crumpled to the terrace floor and did not move. "Help him!" I screamed. Luca was leaning against a planter, his face pale, blood pouring from his shoulder. Judge Hollister Gray, seeing his world end, made a run for it. He tried to slip past the chaos toward a service exit. Giada Lynx stepped into his path, her camera still rolling. "Judge, one more question for the 6 o'clock news. Was it worth it?" 2 PIC officers grabbed him from behind. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound on the terrace. Tiberio Quill, the man who had started it all, was on his knees, his hands zip-tied by Ari. "Don Alfio Luca, please." He wept. "It was just business, a mistake. We can make a deal." Don Alfio, breathing hard, turned his back on him. He said one word: "Betrayal does not bargain." Juno Mary nodded to her officers. "Tiberio Quill, you're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, and a list of corruption charges so long we'll be here until Christmas. Get him out of my sight." The terrace was suddenly quiet. The rain, which had held off, began to fall again, a cold, cleansing drizzle. I ran to Luca, my hands shaking. I tore a strip of fabric from my dress and pressed it hard against his shoulder, against the hilt of the knife still buried there. He hissed in pain, his body slumping against me. "You're okay," I whispered, my tears mixing with the rain on his face. "You're okay. You kept your promise. You're alive." I pressed my forehead to his, just as we had in the motel. I started to hum, my voice breaking. "The La Crime di Mare?" I felt his heart, hammering against my hand, slowly begin to steady. He was here. He was with me. The press, Giada's crew, and now the real press were swarming the terrace. Giada thrust a microphone in my face. "Miss Vale, what happens now?" "What about the Blue Roots?" I looked at her, then at Luca, leaning on me, and Don Alfio, standing guard, his cane dripping. I took a deep breath. I was just a waitress, but I knew the music. "The Blue Roots," I said, my voice clear and strong, "are not a corporate asset. They are a public trust. They belong to the history of this city. As of today, Artemis Lines is transferring all control to the Port Integrity Commission. They will be a community fund, independently supervised. Artemis will be just an operator." I looked at Giada's camera. "We're turning on the lights, all of them. There are no more shadows for men like them to hide in." Don Alfio walked over to me. He looked at Luca, his eyes filled with a fierce, pained pride. Then he looked at me. He held out his silver-headed cane. "No, Don Alfio," I whispered. "I can't." "It is not a crown," he said, pressing the heavy silver head into my hand. "It is not for power. It is for responsibility. You kept the voice of the island safe. Now, you must make sure it is never used for silence again." I took it. The sun was finally breaking through the mist, bathing the glass dome of Sky Garden in a brilliant, warm gold. The nightmare was over. Luca, his face pale but his eyes clear, turned to me. He reached up with his good hand and touched my cheek. "You welcome my father," he whispered, his voice rough. I nodded, my eyes blurred with tears. "And now," he took a shaky breath, a small, true smile finally touching his lips. "Now, I am asking if you will welcome the rest of my life." He leaned in and he kissed me. It wasn't the desperate, fiery kiss from the motel. It wasn't the chaste, public waltz. It was a kiss that tasted of rain and metal and the promise of a really good espresso. It was a foundation. It was a promise kept. It was a homecoming. 1 year later, the Nonna Chetta Island Language Center opened its doors in a converted warehouse on the river. The Blue Roots were thriving, a clean, public line that had created, by last count, 1,000 new jobs and had cut organized crime's hold on the docks by over 60%. I was signing the final document, handing over the last of the executive controls to the new civilian board. My title was Cultural Director. I was in charge of the music. Nonna Chetta, her heart stronger than ever thanks to the best doctors in the country, was in the main room. She was teaching a class of teenagers, not young children, just high schoolers, how to sing the Crooked Man nursery rhyme. I walked out onto the center's new deck. A small, elegant cafe was built into the side, the simple wooden sign reading La Crime. Luca was behind the counter, his suit gone, replaced by a simple white shirt, his sleeves rolled up. He was arguing with a customer about the fine points of a perfect crema. His espresso, it was no longer bad. It was, in fact, the best in Chicago. He smiled when he saw me, a real, easy smile that reached his eyes. Don Alfio was sitting in a chair on the deck, his back to us, watching the river. He wasn't using a cane. He was just listening. The sound of the teenagers singing, the lilt of the old island songs drifted out over the Chicago River. He heard the music. He heard his wife. He heard his home. He nodded once, a slow, satisfied gesture. A simple greeting, that's all it had been. A few words in a forgotten language, but it had changed a fate. It had undone a knot tied in blood a generation ago. And the knot, I realized, was only truly untied when the blinding light of the public truth finally met the island voice. A voice that had learned how to love, how to forgive, and, when it mattered most, how to write new rules. Thank you so much for listening to our story. Where in the world are you listening from? We'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Let's connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And if you want to support us even more, please hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people. We'll see you in the next one.